What's wild is that I didn't see any buzz about this movie until I was planning out my January watches in my Cinemark app and saw this one. And, it was like the first thing that was being released in 2026. So I figured I'd go. So I went into this completely blind, and I'll talk about it more, of course, throughout the video, but I was genuinely surprised by this one. So today we're talking about We Bury the Dead. So this movie was written and directed by Zach Hilditch, who also did 1922, which was a movie that was released a few years ago on Netflix. It was a Stephen King adaptation. This one stars Daisy Ridley with performances by Brenton Thwaites and Mark Cole Smith. After a catastrophic military disaster, the dead don't just rise, they hunt. Ava searches for her missing husband, but what she finds is far more terrifying. And so Ava is the character that is played by Daisy Ridley. So we follow her as she navigates the island of Tasmania after it's bombed accidentally by the US, which is a really interesting storyline considering recent events, I will say. So in this story, obviously, she is looking for her husband who was on vacation in Tasmania, and she is hoping that he is one of the, not survivors, I guess one of the dead that rise, right? And she's hoping this, as well as that there's something left within, the people that return. So this is technically a zombie movie, which tends not to be one of my favorite genres. I do find it to be a little overdone, and there's a lot of cliches that tend to be utilized. And I'll talk more about how this movie does and doesn't fall into these cliches. I had made a post on TikTok discussing my ins and outs for 2026, and I did say that one of the things I don't necessarily want to see more of, or too much more of, is grief horror. I get that it has a time and a place, but I think it's something that we've done so much with, and so many things have fallen under this. So that being said, this is a movie about grief and loss, though it really didn't bother me as much as maybe I would have thought, knowing that that was a major theme of the movie. It is done very well, and I think it explores a lot of the messy relationships we have with grief and some of the things that, like the behaviors that don't serve us very well when we are grieving. It has a lot of very human emotions in it, which I did enjoy. It also explores themes around how we respond to disasters. So in this, of course, when this bomb or weapon or whatever is dropped, everybody dies instantly. So it explores this absolutely devastating form of grief where entire families and generations and even pets, like living animals, are all wiped out all in this single moment. This movie also explores how far people are willing to go for the ones that they love, and how it can lead to some pretty dark decision making and some pretty questionable decision making as well. The cinematography in this movie is excellent. It's very pretty to look at. Even some of the more devastating scenes, there's a lot of really neat images of, the island of Tasmania and these giant plumes of smoke from this weapon. You also see some pretty intriguing shots of people's homes and sort of what happens when everyone drops dead all at the same time. It's intriguing and devastating and really well shot. There was a scene at the beginning where Ava's walking down a stairway and she sort of pauses at the bottom to let some people walk by her, and she's her silhouette is dark, but there's it's lit in front of her in this really nice blue. It's very pretty. There's another shot that happens when there's a action sequence happening, and it's shot from above, and it's her kind of crawling through this abandoned bus, and we just see her from the top with through these broken windows, and that was really neat too. There's a lot of creativity that I saw in this movie. The performances are excellent as well. Daisy Ridley is just so compelling in this role. I really haven't seen her in anything outside of Star Wars, so this really explored her range, I think, and she just carries it. She carries the whole thing. I think the supporting performances are good as well, though I will say that one of the male characters that is sort of a supporting role for her, I don't know if it was the writing. I don't think it was his performance. I think he did a good job. His character just kind of grated on me. I don't know. He grew on me later, and I did end up enjoying like him being present for like the final scenes of the movie. But initially I was like, can we just not? I don't know. I found him kind of annoying. So in terms of frights, I don't think this is a particularly scary movie. It leans more into the emotional devastation, I think, than it does into the frights or the visual horror. I will say that the very first person that rose from the dead that we see is the scariest, just in the way that it's depicted. And I'll go into that a little bit more in depth when I talk spoilers. There is some kind of gnarly stuff. I think whenever we have zombies, right, there's going to be gnarly injuries. There's going to be like rotting, and just like kind of some body horror elements as well. So just think, any zombie movie that you've seen is probably like a good metric to know what you're in for this one. One more thing I'll say before we head into spoilers is that if you're going to the theater expecting your quintessential like action-packed kind of goofy zombie movie, this may not be the one for you. It definitely focuses more heavily on the emotional impacts of loss than it does on like the zombies. So just something to know going into it, but I'm going to start spoilers next. So if you want to go into this one spoiler free, pause the video now, go and see this at your local theater. And when you do, come back and leave a comment, tell me how you liked it. So this movie actually really surprised me in how competent of a zombie movie it was and how effective it was for someone who doesn't typically like, I don't know, it's not that I don't like it, I'm just not really drawn to zombie horror in general. I think this one had enough emotional devastation, and that's something that good or bad, I do tend to gravitate towards. I think it gives a very human element to the story. So when we're talking about the themes of kind of messy human emotions and responses to grief, this is kind of seen differently in each character in the movie, because Ava is, at first, we think that she's acting purely out of like love and devotion for her husband, wanting to see if he's still alive, to save him, right? And then throughout the course of the movie, we kind of come to understand that she's more trying to has this futile attempt at trying to resolve this relationship that's been damaged for a while. It's revealed that she cheated on him, and then at the very end, once she does find him and he is dead, she finds out that he was cheating on her as well. So it has this very like unresolved kind of, to me, very human storyline with her. Then you have the character of Clay, who didn't lose anyone in the bombing of Tasmania, but he did sort of express this I think that it can be talked about as a loss, right? Like a loss of connection with his family and his children. And his response to that is kind of this like putting on this facade of being like this, burly, like couldn't care less kind of dude. And so, you have this as well, although he does like go to these extreme lengths to assist Ava on her journey, like driving her through like these burning cities on a motorcycle, which does lend for some really cool cinematography. And he, like I said earlier, his character sort of like agitated me initially. I don't know. And maybe it was, he just really played that kind of like asshole role well enough that I just sort of was like, okay, like let's get this guy out of here, get away from me. But he does have kind of a redemption arc, or at least he had one for me, and I ended up enjoying, especially the final scene. They end up at the resort that Ava's husband was staying at, and after sort of finding out, that he is deceased and that he was cheating on her at the time, they kind of have this like fuck it montage where they're just like dancing and drinking together, and it's fun. It's an interesting sort of, it's a nice little moment, I think. And I also appreciate that they didn't end up sleeping together. They sleep together like in the same bed, but you know, they just kind of pass out drunk or whatever. But I liked that it wasn't like a rebound thing and there wasn't like a romance between them. They were kind of just two like lost souls dealing with this like insanely awful catastrophe that happened. And then the only other character you really get a storyline for is Riley, and he is the army guy who, you know, initially seems to be like on the same page as Ava, like grieving the loss of his wife. And then it just takes a really creepy turn. And so it turns out that he is holding his zombie pregnant wife in his house with the assumption that somehow his baby will be born normally. And so this is kind of a representation of like denial associated with grief. I think like he is just so far gone into his grief that he is collecting the zombies. At one point we find out that he has a bunch of them in like a barn and is like observing their behavior, right? So he's like in denial that this is an ending. And so he's trying to, you know, redeem his wife and have his baby, like, and you know, it's so creepy. And I think that performance is also very effective. I had really high hopes for the zombies initially. We first saw the one in the garage coated in oil. That was so spooky to me, and just the way it was standing very still. Its eyes were like really big and just like really ghostly looking. And I was hoping that that energy would kind of continue throughout, but we start getting some of the cliche, in my opinion, the cliche things that I just don't really care for in a zombie movie. They always make the same noises and the same movements, and it's just kind of like irritating to me. I don't know, it's not effective for me. I think the teeth grinding was new and very gross. So that was like something that I did, you know, I appreciated that they threw in kind of this extra element. I loved the little scene where, like, the scenes in the movie where you really have just like so many people dying at the same time. I guess I shouldn't say I love that. That's kind of dark. But I thought it was cool visually that you had these scenes where, like, there was one scene in the resort where there's a bunch of people who died in child's pose. And then there's, like, the scene where a bunch of people died during a bachelor party. So you have, like, this stripper on the pole just like collapsed really weird, because it's just, I don't know, it's really neat. Like, it's not something that I've seen before. It was just like kind of an interesting way to explore this, like, everyone dies all at the same moment kind of thing. Another thing that was really cool in the way that this movie portrayed the zombies was the scene towards the end of the movie where Ava has been walking for who knows how long after she gets away from Riley. And she comes across a family who passed away inside of their RV. And then later that night, it turns out that the dad did not, or he did pass away, but he came back. But as she's getting ready to like kill him, because some of the zombies come back like aggressive, right? She sort of sees like a hint of something, and he is digging a hole to bury his family in. So even though he's kind of passed into this like zombie form, there's still something left. And this is something that I've really not seen in a zombie movie at all. And I think it's really cool and really, like, I don't know, like, it was so emotionally compelling to me. I loved that scene and how well done it was. It was super, super cool. And I think that was like one of the selling points on this movie for me. So obviously the last thing that we have to talk about is the baby. So it's revealed that Riley's wife, when she left the house that he was in after Ava killed him, she has her baby in the middle of the desert, and she's standing in the middle of the road, and Clay and Ava come upon her, and Ava kind of figures out what happened and goes and finds this perfectly healthy looking normal baby. And so I think that really like solidified the story for me. I think it was a really perfect like full circle moment, right? Of like this like devastation and this grief, but then also like this kind of signal of hope. And it's an interesting image too of like the, you know, the protection of like a mother's womb against this like devastating bomb protected this baby, and it's the only living thing, the only like the last living thing on the entire island. I thought it was cool. Like, it's a little cheesy, but I thought it was neat, and it was, you know, also just another moment to bring back this detail that the zombies have something left, right? Like, she had something left enough to put this baby in a safe space and then wait on the road, right? Like, we don't know how long she was standing there, wait on the road until somebody came. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I like to think that that's kind of another nod to this like lore in this particular movie, that the zombies have something left in them. I think there's another theme here that we could point to, like unfinished business, right? And like resolution. And, you know, because that's one of the things, like they don't know why some of them come back and some of them don't. And so the idea is that some of them have like unfinished business. And so the dad's unfinished business, the zombie dad, was to, you know, bury his family. And then you have this woman whose unresolved business was to like have her child. And that was, you know, she was able to do that. And it was like safe and happy and healthy. And well, happy, I don't know. I should probably not assume that because it's, but anyway, I don't know. I think overall this movie was emotionally impactful in a way that I was not expecting from a zombie movie. It definitely is more of a plot-driven, like emotion-driven story than it is just like a zombie horror. But I think it's really tough nowadays to make like something that is a zombie movie original. And no hate to that. Like, it's a good formula, and I think that it can be really entertaining, but it's just not something I gravitate towards. So I don't know. But this being the first thing I watched and reviewed in 2026 feels really promising to me. I liked this movie, so I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It is something that I would probably recommend to other people. If you like emotionally impactful movies, I would definitely recommend this one. It's just got a lot to like about it. So that is my review of We Bury the Dead. Thank you so much for joining me in my first video of 2026. I'm looking forward to all of the movies that are going to be released this month and the rest of this year. I think we have some promising things. So if you haven't already, like this video, leave me a comment down below. I'm always happy to see new subscribers, so please subscribe to my channel. You can also find me on Instagram and Letterboxd, and I do short form videos on TikTok.